All right. So can everyone see the flyer?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, good. All right. So what I will do is I'm just waiting for Professor Larson to join us. Oh, here you go, Professor Larson. I see you. All right, wonderful. Hey, good morning. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for joining us. All right, so give me just one moment. Let me just double check everything before I start. All right, are we ready to begin?
Yeah.
All right. So what I would do is I would ask, let's see if I can do this. I'm just going to mute everyone as I begin, and then please unmute yourself whenever you're ready to talk. All right? Is that all right? Okay. So I'm gonna do is I'm gonna. All right. All right. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate taking the time to join us for this conference today. So this is part of a series that we've been having for quite a while. And it's a development of a collaboration that we've had with the University of Mumbai and also Florida, of course, ours, Florida International University and the World Federation. And the focus in the development of Khoja studies, which we initiated, I think, about 4 years ago or 5 years ago. I don't know, Michelle would know better. When we first started our discussions in Paris many years ago, is thinking about how do we examine and think about sort of Indic literature, sacred literature, but in a comparative sort of perspective. So rather than kind of siloing the study of Islam from the study of Hinduism, to understand that sort of, especially in the Indic context, each of these traditions are connected. So Hinduism, Islam, Jainism, all of these traditions are kind of developing with each other. In different ways, and they're drawing inspiration from each other. The terminologies are being shared, and particularly at the vernacular tradition. So at the level of popular religion, there's a tremendous amount of overlap, and the idea of sacred authority is something that's also being shared by these different communities. And so that's kind of the development of the idea of Khoja studies, and particularly focusing, initially we really began focusing on the Khoja community, which is an Indic Muslim community that converted to Islam around 500 years ago, with different charismatic peers or saints in South Asia and Sindh and Punjab. And Michelle's work especially focuses on Punjab and I'm sorry, on Sindh, and really trying to uncover the unique sort of nature of Sindh. I mean, Sindh is one of the oldest inhabited parts of South Asia. And as such, it has a tremendous diversity of religious experiences, and also especially connected to sort of indigenous traditions that are connected to sort of the landscape, the river, the Indus River, etc. And so that's kind of the initiative that we sort of began, and we had a couple of conferences. So our first conference started, I think 3-4 years ago now in Paris. And then last year we had a conference in Mumbai. And then hopefully later next year, then we would probably have, or in 2022, then we would have our third conference at FIU. So each of the partners being able to sort of host the conference. And so this is kind of a continuation of sort of these ideas, and trying to sort of understand, particularly looking at Gujarati and Sindhi. So these are kind of languages that are generally marginalized in the larger study of, for instance, of Islam or of Hinduism. They're not seen as sort of core, as important as the high languages of the traditions, like Sanskrit and Arabic and Persian. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do, is we're trying to broaden the discussion. And also, especially, the other thing that we really wanted to do is to have this as a discussion in, sort of languages, right, that work with scholars sort of in the developing world and also in the developed world. So sort of one of the advantages of the pandemic is that it really has allowed us to embrace technology like Zoom. And that's really given us the opportunity to be able to connect with scholars all over the world without the cost. So hopefully the pandemic and sort of what comes out of it in terms of technology is the beginning of sort of a flattening of the earth in terms of the ability of us to communicate deeply in terms of our ideas and experiences and understanding and research across the world. And so we're really glad and very thankful that the University of Mumbai has worked with us over the past couple of years with our MOU, the World Federation, OSHOSS, SEAS, Professor Boivin's organization, Center for South Asian Studies in Paris, to develop sort of a cadre of thinkers, of scholars, of writers that are sort of focusing on these topics and really sort of taking the lead on the next phase of thinking about sort of religion, vernacular religion in South Asia as sort of really sort of a nexus of different sort of traditions and sort of the inspiration that comes from that. So I really appreciate you all joining us today. And what I will do is I will turn it over to Professor Larson, who is the chair of the Department of Religious Studies at Florida International University. He completed his doctorate at New York University, and he is a scholar of sort of the classical tradition, particularly focusing on the Dead Sea Scrolls. He knows Arabic, ancient Greek, Latin, Aramaic. He's a wonderful scholar and a great supporter sort of the work that we're doing. So we're very sort of honored to be able to have him join us, and I will spotlight him now to just say a few words. Right.
Thank you very much, Professor Akhtar, and welcome, dear colleagues. On behalf of the President and the Provost and the Dean of the School of International and Public Affairs at FIU, it's my pleasure to welcome you all this morning. I think in normal times we read the news and we might read of some happening in a different part of the world, an earthquake, a tsunami in South Florida. It would be hurricanes or a protest or a change in government. But in these days, we are all facing in every part of the world, in every country, every people group is experiencing this pandemic. So these are not normal times. But our desire to build understanding and greater awareness continues on nonetheless. And so I am very delighted that you all are meeting today to discuss some topics that maybe don't get the normal attention that they should. But of course, we live in a global world, and the more we can understand interconnections between peoples and between religions, the better off we are. So it's my hope that today you will have a fruitful discussion, that your work will continue and build. It's very encouraging to hear Dr. Akhtar talk about what's already been done. And we are delighted to welcome our colleagues from the University of Mumbai, as well as from around the world, and Professor Boivin. I hope that you have a wonderful discussion today. The papers look fascinating, and I wish you all the best, dear colleagues.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate it. All right, so with that, I will introduce then Pareen Somani. So she will be the panel chair for this panel that we're doing this morning. So Pareen has an extensive bio. So relevant to this is that she is also the director of the International Association for the Study of Vigyans. She's a writer, a scholar. She's an accomplished academician, astute educational lecturer, motivational speaker. She has won many awards, including most recently the She Inspires Award at the House of Parliament in England. Her bio is incredibly extensive, and I will allow her to introduce herself as well. But she will then sort of help us to introduce the rest of the panelists today. So I will turn it over to Pareen.
Thank you, Professor Akhtar, for your kind introduction. I don't think so I need to say anything more about it, but thank you so much for using such a beautiful, kind words for me and inviting me here. It is my pleasure to be the panel chair for this session. I'm excited to hear all the presentation today and broaden my knowledge on comparative Indic sacred literature. I'm sure that you are too. I would like to, without going further, I would like to introduce our first presenter, Bharat Mehta, Professor Bharat Mehta from India. He's going to present his paper on Mahakayam Sanskruti Darshan, Tagore Sandarbh. Professor Bharat Mehta is working for MS University in Gujarati department. He has published multiple books. He is an academic writer who has edited and reviewed many books. He is a guide for PhD students. He has received many awards and has worked for many years for the academic institution. So Bharat Bhai, the floor is yours. Bharat Bhai, we can't hear you. Bharat Bhai, you're mute. Thank you.
Hello.
That's better.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
I hear you.
हाँ,
I can hear you.
अच्छा મહાકાવ્યમાં સંસ્કૃતિ દર્શન ટાગોરના સંદર્ભે ટાગોર મેં એટલા માટે લીધા છે મિત્રો કે 18મી સદીમાં આપણે ત્યાં જડતા બહુ વધી ગઈ હતી ભારતમાં અને આ જે ધાર્મિક જડતા આપણને આજે 21મી સદીમાં જે આપણે શ્વેત અને અશ્વેત વચ્ચે જોઈએ છીએ, જે આપણે ભારતમાં મોબ લિન્ચિંગમાં જોઈએ છીએ, જ્યારે જ્યારે આવી જડતા આવે છે ત્યારે ભારતે પોતે પોતાની ખોજ કરી છે અને એક સ્થિતિમાંથી ગતિમાં કઈ રીતે જવું એની આપણને એને સમજણ આપી છે. પોતાની એક પ્રકૃતિ છે, ભારતની એક પ્રકૃતિ છે. એટલે ટાગોરે પોતે એક નિબંધ લખ્યો હતો. ટાગોર આપણે જાણીએ છીએ એમ 19મી સદીમાં 1861માં એમનો જન્મ. આ નિબંધ લખાયો છે 1912માં. કારણ કે 1905માં બંગાળ વિભાજન થયું અને ભારતમાં એક જે ઓરિએન્ટાલિઝમના નામે એક હિન્દુ ઓરિયન્ટ, એક મુસ્લિમ ઓરિયન્ટ અને હિન્દુ ઓરિયન્ટ ઇઝ બેટર દેન મુસ્લિમ ઓરિયન્ટ, આ બધા પ્રકારની રમતો શરૂ થઈ ચૂકી હતી. ત્યારે ટાગોરે આ નિબંધ ચિંતાથી લખ્યો હતો અને એમણે લખ્યું ભારત વર્ષની ઇતિહાસ ધારા. ભારત પાસે ભલે ઇતિહાસ નથી, પણ જેને આપણે કલ્ચરલ હિસ્ટ્રી કહીએ છીએ, એ આપણા જે એપિક છે એ એપિક કોને યાદ કરે છે. એટલે આ નિબંધ એમણે લખ્યો. ભારત તીર્થ નામની કવિતા લખી, ગોરા અને ઘરે બાહીરે નવલકથા લખી અને એ દ્વારા એમણે પશ્ચિમનો જે રાષ્ટ્રવાદ છે, જનૂની રાષ્ટ્રવાદ, એ જનૂની રાષ્ટ્રવાદને એક લેખક તરીકે જવાબ આપ્યો છે. એટલે એડવર્ડ સઈદ એમને ક્યુબાના લેખક જોસ મર્ટી સાથે તુલના કરીને કહે છે કે જેમને પોતે રાષ્ટ્રવાદની આલોચના કરી અને પોતાના મૂળિયા ક્યાં છે ખબર છે અને વિશ્વ માનવી બનવાનું આપણને સ્વપ્ન દેખાડ્યું હતું. એટલે આ નિબંધ અદ્ભુત નિબંધ છે. ભારતના દરેક માણસે વાંચવો જોઈએ એવો આ નિબંધ છે. ટાગોર એ રાજા રામમોહન રાયની પરંપરામાં આવે છે અને રાજા રામમોહન રાય પણ એ સદીમાં આવે છે કે જ્યારે જુએ છે કે આ બહુપત્નીત્વ, આ બાળ લગ્નો, આ સતી પ્રથા એ 18મી સદીના જે અનાચારો છે વધી ગયા છે. 1833માં બ્રહ્મો સમાજની સ્થાપના કરીને રાજા રામમોહન રાય મૃત્યુ પામે છે, પણ એમણે પણ વેદાંતમાં જવું પડ્યું અને એકેશ્વરવાદની વાત કરી. અને એ પોતે કેટલા મલ્ટીલિંગ્વલ હતા. તમે જુઓ કે અરબી, ફારસી, સંસ્કૃત, અંગ્રેજી અને બંગાળી 7 ભાષાઓ સાથે એમનો ગરોબો હતો. આમ જે બંગાળ રેનેસા જે આપણો છે એમાં એક આગલી કડી રૂપે ટાગોર આવે છે અને ટાગોર પણ પોતાનો સંવાદ પોતાના પ્રાચીન અને પુરોગામી કવિઓ સાથે કરે છે. અને એ કવિઓ છે વ્યાસ, એ કવિઓ છે વાલ્મીકી, એ કવિ છે ઉપનિષદનો કવિ, એ કવિ કાલિદાસ પણ હોઈ શકે. અને એ પોતે આ જે સંવાદ રચે છે. એટલે હું જે આ ટાગોરનો નિબંધ છે ભારત વર્ષેર ઇતિહાસ ધારા, એને હું લેખ નથી કહેતો, એ ઇતિહાસનો લેખ નથી, એ ખરેખર એક કવિએ કરેલું એક નિબંધ છે. અને નિબંધ હોવાથી એમાં ભરપૂર કલ્પનાઓ છે, અને એ આપણા ઇતિહાસને, કલ્ચરલ હિસ્ટ્રીને વાંચવાની એક કોશિશ કરે છે કે હું કઈ રીતે આપણે ત્યાં પછી આ બધા જ સાહિત્ય ઉપર ઈરાવતી કર્વે, દુર્ગા ભાગવત બધાએ ખૂબ લખ્યું છે. પણ ટાગોરે એનો પ્રારંભ કર્યો હતો, અને ટાગોર કહે છે કે આ કોઈ કુટુંબ કથા નથી, આ સંસ્કૃતિની કથાઓ છે. અને આ સંસ્કૃતિ કથાઓમાંથી આપણે શું પ્રેરણા મેળવી? એટલે એમણે પહેલું ઉદાહરણ આપણને એ આપ્યું કે આ પેન્ડુલમ, જે ઘડિયાળનું લોલક છે એમ ચાલતું હોય છે, સ્થિતિ અને ગતિ. તો જુઓ તમે કે જેણે એ શરૂ કરે છે કે મહાભારત શરૂ ક્યાંથી થાય છે? સર્પસત્ર કરી રહ્યો છે, એક જાતિનું નિકંદન કાઢી રહ્યો છે એક રાજા, જેનું નામ છે જન્મેન્જય. અને આ જન્મેન્જય ને એક ઋષિ રોકે છે અને કહે છે કે આ સર્પસત્ર ન કર. તો આ સર્પસત્ર સામે અવાજ ઉઠાવનાર કવિ, અને આપણને ટાગોર કહે છે કે જન્મેન્જયને કઈ ખાસ માન આપણા પુરાણોમાં મળ્યું નહીં, કારણ કે આ પ્રજા સંમિલનની પુરસ્કર્તા છે. આ પ્રજા એ જે વિખવાદ કરાવે છે એની પુરસ્કર્તા નથી. અને પર્ટિક્યુલર ટાઈમ 1905માં થોડો વિખવાદ શરૂ થયો હતો, એટલે ટાગોર કહે છે કે મને શ્રદ્ધા છે કે પુનઃ આપણે સંસ્કૃતિ મિલન કરીશું. અને આજે પણ જ્યારે આપણે આ ક્ષણે 2020માં બેઠા છીએ, ત્યારે પણ અમેરિકાના સમાચાર આવી રહ્યા છે અને અહીંના સમાચાર આવે છે, ત્યારે આપણને ખબર છે. અને ટાગોર કહે છે કે આ સર્વનાશ નોતરે છે. શ્વેત અશ્વેત, યુરોપિયન, એશિયન, આ જે આર્ય અનાર્ય, દ્રવિડ, હિન્દુ, મુસ્લિમ, આ જે ઘૃણા છે, એ ઘૃણા મનુષ્ય જાતની નો સર્વનાશ સર્જે છે. અને એટલા માટે ટાગોર કહે છે કે આપણા કવિઓએ કોને માન આપ્યું છે? એમ કરીને એ આપણને એક નવી વાત કરે છે. એ કહે છે કે તમે જુઓ, તમે રામચંદ્ર અને રામને મર્યાદા પુરુષોત્તમ માન્યા, પણ એ મર્યાદા પુરુષોત્તમ નથી. એ પોતે પોતાના કુલગુરુ વશિષ્ઠને કુલગુરુ નથી બનાવતા, પરંતુ વિશ્વામિત્રને બનાવે છે. જે વિશ્વામિત્ર એક નવા ક્ષત્રિય છે ને વિશ્વના મિત્ર, ફ્રેન્ડ ઓફ વર્લ્ડ. આ વિશ્વામિત્રને કુલગુરુ બનાવવા, અને વિશ્વામિત્ર એમને ક્યાં લઈ જાય છે? જનક પાસે. આ જનક શું કરે છે? તો એ ખેતીવાડીના જનક છે. ખેતીવાડીના, કે યજ્ઞ કરવો એ નહીં, કર્મ કરવું, પડે છે એ નહીં ખાવાનું, ખેતી કરવી. એગ્રીકલ્ચર ઇઝ ધ ફર્સ્ટ સ્ટેપ ઓફ કલ્ચર. અને જનક એ ખેતીના જનક તરીકે આપણે જોઈ શકીએ. અને સીતા, જે ચાસ પડ્યો એમાંથી એમને જે દીકરી પ્રાપ્ત થઈ, એ સીતા પોતે જ ખેતી છે. અને ખેતી સાથે જો આ પ્રચાર જાય ભારતમાં, તો ભારતમાં એક સંસ્કૃતિ, બ્રાહ્મણ સંસ્કૃતિ જે હતી યજ્ઞની, એની સામે એક ભક્તિની સંસ્કૃતિ, એક પશુધન, એની સામે કૃષિધનની સંસ્કૃતિ. એટલે જે બ્રાહ્મણ હતા 4 મુખ વાળા, અને વિષ્ણુ, જેનો રામના આપણે અવતાર કયા, એને 4 હાથ છે. હવે જો આચાર અને વિચાર એ ભેગા ન થાય તો પ્રશ્ન થાય. અને ત્યારે એક પ્રકારનું આપણે ક્ષત્રિય અને બ્રાહ્મણ વચ્ચે પણ એક દ્વંદ્વ જોતા હતા. ભૃગુ જે રીતે વિષ્ણુને છાતીમાં મારે છે, કાર્તવીર્ય જમદગ્નિની ગાયો ચોરી જાય છે. આ ગાય એક મોટી પ્રોપર્ટી હતી, અને જમદગ્નિના પુત્ર પરશુરામ પ્રતિજ્ઞા લે છે કે હું આ વિશ્વમાંથી ક્ષત્રિયોનો નાશ કરીશ. તમે જુઓ, એ જ પરશુરામને પગે લાગીને એક રામચંદ્ર નામનો ક્ષત્રિય એમનું દિલ જીતી લે છે, કારણ કે રામ એ સંમિલનના પુરસ્કર્તા છે. એટલે આ બ્રાહ્મણ અને આ ક્ષત્રિય, એટલે આ કોઈ કુટુંબ કથાઓ નથી મિત્રો, આ કલ્ચરની કથા છે. જે કલ્ચર ડોમિનેન્ટ હતું બ્રાહ્મણ અને ક્ષત્રિય, એના અંદર પણ આ પ્રકારનું જે હતું. અને એની વાત કરે છે કે કેટલાય ક્ષત્રિયો જે બદલાયા નહીં, જરાસંઘ જેવા, હરિશ્ચંદ્ર જેવા, જે સ્થિતિમાં જ રહ્યા, ગતિમાં ન ગયા. ગતિ સમયની સાથે વહેવું પડે. એટલે બ્રાહ્મણોના પગ કૃષ્ણ ધુવે છે, જે શિશુપાલને નથી ગમતું. દ્રોણ, કૃપાચાર્ય, અશ્વત્થામાને એ નથી ગમ્યું. જેમ પેલો પર્વતારોહક કોઈ હિમાલય કે આલ્પ્સ પર્વત ચડતો હોય તો પોતાની જાતને બાંધે છે, અને ચડે છે, થોડોક ચાલે છે પાછો બાંધે છે, થોડો ચાલે છે પાછો બાંધે છે. ટાગોરે આ મેટાફર આપ્યું છે. એ જ રીતે સંસ્કૃતિનો માણસ પોતાને બાંધે છે અને પોતાને ચાલે છે. અને જે માણસ બાંધતો નથી એ ચાલી નથી શકતો, જે ચાલતો નથી એ બાંધી નથી શકતો. આચાર વિચારની એકતા જો નહીં હોય તો પછી આપણે વાત કરીશું આપણે કેટલી વસુધૈવ કુટુંબકમની, અને અહીંયા આપણે મોબ લિંચિંગ કરતા રહીશું, અહીંયા આપણે ઉનાકાંડ કરતા રહીશું, આપણે વાત કરીશું યુનિવર્સલ લવ ધાય નેબર ધાય સેલ્ફની, અને આપણે કોઈ અશ્વેતને મારતા રહીશું. એટલા માટે કર્મ, ભક્તિ અને યજ્ઞ આ જે વસ્તુ હતી આપણી, એ દક્ષિણમાં જો આ વસ્તુ જાય, ખેતી, તો અને બ્રાહ્મણો યજ્ઞ કરે છે એટલે વિશ્વાસ નથી આપણા લેખક, એટલે રામને મોકલે છે. અને રામ એ અહલ્યાને જો પુનર્જીવિત કરે. શલ્યા જે બ્રાહ્મણે એ જમીનને બંજર કરી હતી, યજ્ઞ કરીને ફળવતી નથી બનવા દીધી, એ ફળવતી બને છે રામના સ્પર્શથી. અને પછી વાનરોને મળવું, ચાંડાળના મિત્ર. આપણે એમ કહીએ છીએ કે શૂદ્રનો એમણે કરેલો વધ કે પત્નીનો ત્યાગ, એ એમ કહેવાય છે કે એ ક્ષેપક ઘટનાઓ છે. રામનો મહિમા ઓછો કરવાનો પણ ઘટના હોય છે. અને આ રામ કોને મળે છે? તો કે રાવણ જે છે એ શિવને પૂજે છે. કૃષ્ણને પણ જેનું બાણાસુરના દીકરા માટે અપહરણ કર્યું, એ પણ તમે જો બાણાસુર શિવને ભજે છે. હવે આ શિવ અને બ્રહ્મા, બ્રાહ્મણ અને ક્ષત્રિય, એનું સંમિલન જરૂરી હતું. અને પછી જે નવી જાતિ આવી, અનાર્ય, જે પ્રજા અહીંયા આવી છે, એ પ્રજા આર્ય છે, અને અનાર્ય જે પ્રજા છે એમના પણ એક દેવ છે, ગળામાં સાપ વીંટનારા, ભભૂત લગાવનારા શિવ. અને આ શિવ જે છે એને અને બ્રહ્માને ભેગા કરવાના છે. એટલે રુદ્ર બનાવીને, અને મૂળ આપણને લેખક એમ કે છે ટાગોર કે આ કવિઓએ જો કેવું કલ્પન કર્યું, ત્રિદેવની કલ્પના કરી, બ્રહ્મા વિષ્ણુ મહેશને ભેગા કર્યા. આ ત્રણેય દેવો એક થઈ જાય તો સંસ્કૃતિમાં જે સંઘર્ષ ચાલે છે એ સંવાદમાં પરિણમે. અને એટલા માટે જ ફર્સ્ટ લવ મેરેજ ઓફ ઇન્ડિયા, પાર્વતીનું શંકરને પરણવું. આ રીતે જો આપણે જોઈએ તો એમણે એમ કહ્યું કે આ ગીતાથી તમે ડરી ના જાઓ. આ ગીતા જ્ઞાન કર્મ ભક્તિનો મહિમા છે. અને એટલા માટે એ કહે છે કે આજે જો તમે શાંતિથી વિચારશો તો એ વૈજ્ઞાનિક પ્રયાસો જે આપણે કરીએ છીએ એ પ્રયાસોમાં ગીતાને રસ પડે, કારણ કે એ માને છે કે કર્મનો મહિમા કરો. દ્રવિડો અહીંયા જે હતા રસિક હતા, તત્વજ્ઞાની નહોતા. એમની પાસે સંગીત હતી, કલ્પના હતું. અને એ જો બંનેનું મિલન થાય એટલે આર્ય અને અનાર્યનું મિલન થાય. એટલે એ કહે છે કે હિન્દુ એ જ છે કે જે સંપૂર્ણપણે આર્ય નથી, જે સંપૂર્ણપણે અનાર્ય નથી. જે દ્રવિડોની માતૃ સંસ્થા હતી એ પિતૃસત્તાક સંસ્થાને પડકાર પણ આપનારી હતી. એટલે જ આપણે હિડમ્બાને જોઈએ છે, ઉલુપીને જોઈએ છે, ચિત્રાંગદાને જોઈએ છે. એમણે જે નાટકો લખ્યા એ નાટકો આપણે જોઈએ તો ખ્યાલ આવે. ચિત્રાંગદાને લઈને નાટક લખ્યું કે આ ટ્રાઇબલ છોકરીઓ જેમના દીકરાઓએ આ બધાને સાચવ્યા. તો આ રીતે માતૃ શાસનની વાત અને એક સંસ્કૃતિનો ચાલતો સંદર્ભ, અને આ બધામાં એકદમ જ આપણને એમ થાય કે ચાલો કે આ શૂદ્રનું શું કરીશું, આ મનુસ્મૃતિનું શું કરીશું. અને ટાગોર બહુ સરસ કહે છે. ટાગોર કહે છે કે આ મનુસ્મૃતિમાં શું છે. જે શૂદ્રની વાત છે એમાં જો કે એક વાત છે, ટાગોર કહે છે કે કર્મકાંડો કરનાર અને મૂર્તિ પૂજા કરનારની આકરી ટીકા પણ છે. જે વસ્તુ દયાનંદ સરસ્વતીમાં આવી, જે વસ્તુ આપણે રાજા રામમોહન રાયમાં આવી, જે વસ્તુ આપણે જેને સંસ્કૃતિ સમન્વય કહીએ, ત્યારે આપણે મુસ્લિમ શાસનના પરિચયમાં આવ્યા અને પછી આપણને જે નામા લખવાની ટેવ પડી, એકેશ્વરવાદનો આપણે પરિચય થયો. અકબરના વખતે આપણે જે શાંતિ અને સુલે અનુભવી, દિને ઇલાહી. તો એ જે મનુસ્મૃતિની ચર્ચા કહે છે કે એ શૂદ્રની ચર્ચા કરતા કહે છે કે તમે કોઈ પણ વ્યક્તિને નીચે પાડો છો ત્યારે એ વ્યક્તિ તો નીચે પડે છે. એને તક નથી મળી, બીજું બધું નથી મળ્યું, એમાં એને તમે ધક્કો મારો તો બિચારો નીચે પડવાનો જ છે કોઈ પણ વ્યક્તિ. પણ એ નીચે પડે છે તો સાથે સાથ તમે જ્યાં છો ત્યાં નથી રહેતા, તમે પણ થોડા નીચે ઉતરો છો. તમે પોતે થોડા નીચે ઉતરો છો. ટાગોરે આપણને કવિતામય આ વાત કરી છે કે કોઈને આપણે જયારે નીચા ગણીએ છીએ ત્યારે તમે ખુદ નીચા થાવ છો. અને એટલા માટે જ એ કહે છે કે ભારત તીર્થમાં, હે બ્રાહ્મણ તું થોડો નીચે આવ, હે શૂદ્ર તું જરા માફ કર, હે બ્રાહ્મણ તું અપરાધ બોધ અનુભવ, હે કુશ ઈશાન મુસ્લિમ બધા આવો અને મારા ભારત તીર્થને આપણે ઉજાડીએ. આ ભારત તીર્થ કવિતા, આ ભારત વર્ષેર ઇતિહાસ ધારા, આ ગોરામાં શું છે એ જ વાત કરીએ એમ. કારણ કે આ બધી ચિંતાઓ હતી એમને. એ જયારે ગોરા લખે છે 1907માં, મિત્રો એમને ગીતાંજલિ માટે ઇનામ મળ્યું અને આ બધી રચનાઓની વિશ્વમાં ચર્ચા નથી. ખરેખર જે ચર્ચવી જોઈતી હતી એ તો એમની વાર્તાઓ હતી. એમની એક ટૂંકી વાર્તા છે સ્ટ્રેસ પાસ. અને આ સ્ટ્રેસ પાસ વાર્તામાં શું છે, એક ભક્તિ કરનારી સ્ત્રી છે અને કાયમ ભક્તિ કરે છે, લોકોમાં આદર છે, પણ બને છે એવું કે એક દિવસ મંદિરમાં ભૂંડ પેસી ગયું અને એ બિચારી ગભરાઈને લોકોને કહ્યું, એટલે લોકો ભૂંડને મારવા આવ્યા. એને કહ્યું નહીં 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 નહીં, ભૂંડને મારી ના નાખશો, એ તો બિચારું ભૂંડ છે, એને કાઢી નાખો. અને લોકોનો આદર એકદમ ઓછો થઈ ગયો કે આ કેવી પાપીણી છે જેને શિવલિંગ ભ્રષ્ટ કર્યું, એ ભૂંડને મારવા નથી દેતી. મિત્રો એ વાત આ જ કહી રહ્યા છે કે જે જડતા છે અને જે શુદ્ધ ધર્મ છે. જો પેલી સ્ત્રી એ માને છે કે આત્મા એ પરમાત્મા, એટલે બરાબર છે કે એને કહ્યું કે આવીને જાય છે જતું રહેવા દો, પણ એને મારી ના નાખશો. આ જે વાત હતી એ ટાગોરની વાર્તામાં છે, ટાગોરની નવલકથામાં ઘરે બાહિરેમાં છે. અને એ દ્વારા એ આપણને વાત કહેતા હતા, કારણ કે આપણે એ ગાળામાં પણ સામ્રાજ્યવાદની સાથે જીવતા હતા અને સામ્રાજ્યવાદ કઈ પટ્ટી નથી ગયો. ભલે ફુકોયામાં કે એન્ડ ઓફ હિસ્ટરી, પણ હજી એન્ડ ઓફ હિસ્ટરી નથી થયું. હજી પણ વોરની વાત થાય છે અને ઈરાકમાં હમણાં જ આપણે ઘટના જોઈ છે. ફેક ન્યૂઝથી તમે કોઈ પણ દુનિયાના દેશને કચડી પણ શકો છો. તો આ જે વાત એ ટાગોર એ જમાનામાં એક આ નિબંધ લખવા પાછળ લખવા ખાતર નથી લખાયો, એક મોટી ચિંતા એ ભારતમાં જોઈ રહ્યા હતા. કારણ કે એ વખતે ભારતમાં હિન્દુ મુસ્લિમને જુદા પાડવાની ગુડ ઓરિયન્ટ બેડ ઓરિયન્ટના નામે એક રમત શરૂ થઈ હતી. અને જે રમત આજે ખૂબ ચાલે છે, ખૂબ ચાલે છે. અને એક ખૂબ ચાલતી રમતને પડકારવા માટે લખાયેલો આ નિબંધ છે. એટલે નિબંધના અંતે એમણે આ સર્વનાશવાળી વાત મેં કહી હતી. એમણે છેલ્લે એ કહ્યું કે મને ખબર છે કે સંમિલનની વાત ઘણીવાર મુશ્કેલ હોય છે, પણ સમસ્યા જેટલી મોટી તપસ્યા એટલી મોટી રાખવી પડશે. આ શબ્દ કેટલો સરસ છે, સમસ્યા જેટલી મોટી તપસ્યા એટલી મોટી. તો આ આપણા જે સંસ્કૃતિ ચિંતકો છે, બહુ મોટા ચિંતક છે ટાગોર. આપણા બહુ નજીકના એક ક્લાસિક પોએટ છે, જેમણે વેદ ઉપનિષદમાંથી પ્રેરણા લઈને ગીતાંજલિ લખી હતી, જેમને અનેક સંસ્કૃતિનો બહોળો પરિચય હતો. એ દ્વારકાના ટાગોર કે એમના પિતાની બધી જે વાતો આપણે જયારે સાંભળીએ છીએ, તો જેને આપણે બહુસંસ્કૃતિ કહીએ છીએ, એ બહુસંસ્કૃતિ અથવા સંસ્કૃતિ સંયોજન, બે સંસ્કૃતિઓ ભેગી થાય છે ત્યારે જે કોન્ફ્લિક્ટ થાય છે, એ કોન્ફ્લિક્ટને મિટાવવા વાળા માણસો કોણ છે? એ સર્જક છે, એ લેખક છે. એટલે રામને લઈ આવે છે, એટલે વિશ્વામિત્રને લઈ આવે છે, એટલા માટે એ ગોરાને લઈ આવે છે, ગૌર મોહન. જે છોકરો તો ક્યાંયનો છે, પણ જયારે ખબર પડે છે કે હું ભારતીય નથી, ત્યારે પોતાની જાતને મોટો ભારતીય સમજે છે. કારણ કે ભારતે જે મને આપ્યું છે, તમે બરાબર આ લેખકની ગોરાની સામે કિમમાં મૂકો, જે નવલકથાને પણ નોબેલ પ્રાઇઝ મળ્યું. આ કિમમાં શું થાય છે? એક વિદેશી છોકરો ભારતમાં હિમાલયમાં ભૂલો પડે અને પછી એના મા બાપને મળી આવે એટલે વતન પાછો છે, બેક ટુ ઓરિજિન. ટાગોર ના પાડે છે. ટાગોર કહે છે કે આપણે વર્ણ સંકર થઈએ, આપણે બધા એકબીજામાં ભળી જઈએ. ગોરા કહે છે કે ના, હું વિદેશનો છોકરો છું અને અહીંયા મોટો થયો, તો હું મોટો ભારતીય છું. હમણાં જ એક ભાઈ, ક્રિશ્ચિયન ભાઈ, JNUમાં એડમિશન લેવા આવ્યા અને એમણે કહ્યું કે તમારે શેના ઉપર PhD કર્યું છે? એમણે કહ્યું કે ઉપનિષદ પર. અરે તમે તો પણ ક્રિશ્ચિયન છો ને, એટલે જ કરવું છે મારે. આ જે ભારતીયતા છે સાહેબ, ભારતીય હિન્દુ, ભારતીય મુસ્લિમ, ભારતીય ઈસાઈ હોવાની જે મજા છે, આપણે ભારતીય બની અને આપણું વિશેષણ ભારતીય રાખીને જો મળીએ તો વિશ્વની એક મહાન સંસ્કૃતિ કે જેને બધા જ સંસ્કૃતિનું સંમિલન અહીં કર્યું છે. આપણા મહાકાવ્યોએ આપણને એ શીખ આપી છે. જો આપણે આ શીખીએ તો એટલા માટે એ દક્ષિણમાં ગયા હતા, ઉત્તરમાંથી રામ. અને અદ્વૈત ત્યાંથી આવ્યો હતો. અદ્વૈત આ પ્રાચીન સાહિત્યની પરંપરામાં કબીર આવે છે, એ પરંપરામાં પછી આ બધા સર્જકો બસેશ્વર આવે છે, અને એ પછી આપણને આ જ વાત આગળ. પણ અદ્વૈત ક્યાંથી આવ્યું? જ્યારે અદ્વૈત આવે છે એ જ્યારે બધાને આપણે એક કર્યા, એક કર્યા, સંસ્કૃતિના સંઘર્ષોને ટાળ્યા. આમ આપણી ભારતીય સાહિત્યના જે 3 તબક્કા છે, વેદ ઉપનિષદ થી માંડીને છેક આપણા અશ્વઘોષ કે ભાસ થી માંડીને છેક 10મી સુધીના નાટકોનો એક યુગ, બીજો યુગ આપણો મધ્યકાલીન ગુજરાત ભારતીય સાહિત્યનો યુગ, સંત સાહિત્યનો યુગ, અને ત્રીજો યુગ આપણો રાજા રામમોહન રાય સાથે શરૂ થતો યુગ. આ ત્રણેય યુગમાં જે રેનેસા આવ્યા છે, એ રેનેસામાં આ ચિંતા રહી છે કે ભારતે પોતાનું જ્યારે જ્યારે સ્થિતિ આવી છે ત્યારે ત્યારે એને પુનઃ મથામણ કરીને એને ગતિ મેળવી છે. અને એ સદીઓની સાધના, અંતિમ વાક્ય એમણે લખ્યું છે કે ભારત પોતાની સદીઓની સાધનાને એળે નહીં જવા દે, એળે નહીં જવા દે, એ નહીં એને વેડફે. એ ફરી એકવાર સંસ્કૃતિ સંમિલનની જ વાત કરશે. એટલે એને કોઈ પણ ગૌરવથી કહેવાનું કે હું ભારતીય છું.
પ્રોફેસર
ગર્વ છે. યસ 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 યસ.
હવે પ્લીઝ તમે રેપ અપ કરશો, ઇફ યુ ડોન્ટ માઇન્ડ.
એટલે બસ આટલી જ વાત છે, કારણ કે અત્યારે આપણે લાસ્ટ મારે એટલું જ કહેવું છે કે જે લોકો બાબરી ધ્વંસ થતા ઉત્સાહમાં નાચતા હતા, એ લોકો માત્ર એકવાર ટાગોરને વાંચે. 2 હાથ જોડીને કહું છું, ટાગોરને વાંચો પ્લીઝ. ઓકે,
Thank you so much, Professor Mehta. It was a very, very inspiring, અને તમે beautifully એટલું સરસ રીતે તમે સમજાવ્યું કે there are no words to talk about it. I do appreciate your help, તમારો જે સપોર્ટ, તમારા જે તમે જે કેટલી મીઠી વાણી કરી ટાગોરની, તે બદલ તમારો ઘણો ઘણો આભાર.
થેન્ક યુ બેન.
અને હવે હું બીજા સ્પીકર આપણા પ્યારેલીભાઈ છે, તમારું સમરી હું પછી કરીશ ભરતભાઈ.
Okay,
I will do the summary at the end. So I would like to invite Pyareli Jiva from United Kingdom. He is going to present his paper on the spirituality of the Gnan. Pyareli Jiva is a freelance scholar of Gnans and a Khochki literature. He is the founder and a formal president of Association of Study of Gnans, United Kingdom. He created and developed Gnan Library and has all the Gnans and Granth digitalized by indicating precious 20 years of his life. He is very committed to the Ismaili literature. Pyareli Bhai, you're welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Namaskar, Yali Madad. Good day to everybody, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to meet with you all tonight, and I am grateful to the team for the opportunity they have accorded to me today. First of all, due to depth of the subject of Gnans, it would be difficult to do justice in the limited time we would have. And secondly, I do not hold a scholarship on this subject, but I have studied the subject for over 20 years, and I am called Gnan Uncle. Therefore, I would plead generosity of the audience to bear with me my lay understanding. I feel it would be more appropriate to give a short history of Ismailis and Gnans. The word Gnans, Janana, is derived from Sanskrit meaning knowledge. The Gnan are a unique feature of Shia Nizari Ismailis of Khwaja tradition of the Indian subcontinent. They form their devotional literature. There are some Gnans that are in didactic or narrative form, which are recited in Jamaat Khanas, places of congregation before and after early morning and evening prayers. The purpose of the Ginan is to convey to the believer gist and teaching of Holy Quran and conceptual understanding of Islam as propagated by the Ismaili Dawa. That also provides guidance on themes such as history, philosophy, ethics, moral teachings, aspects of healthy living, that is non-consumption of drugs, alcohol, tobacco, principles of healthy living, and much more. The same teachings are conveyed by the other faiths in their holy scriptures of Holy Gita, Holy Bible, Holy Quran, and Guru Granth, and many more. Similar tradition exists in Central Asia and Middle East, and their devotional literature is called Qasidas, which portrays the same message as of the Ginans. Pir Sadgur Nur, the seventh Pir during the period of Maulana Mustansir Billah 1036 to 1094, was the first Pir to compose Ginans in subcontinent, and that was in Gujarat in the city of Patan. The mission of the Pir continued until the demise of Pir Tajin. After that period, the mission was continued by the members of Pir Hasan Kabiddin's family until the 19th century. They had the titles of Sayyids, and they did not have the same authority as the Pirs. The last extant Ginan was composed by Sayyida Imam Begum, with last Ginan Aye Rehman. In its rapid expansion, Islam encountered many cultures. Most of these encounters were fruitful and resulted in the renewal of ancient cultures such as the Greek philosophy and other sciences like mathematics and medicine. Such extension of human civilization was truly a hallmark of Islam's dynamism between the late 9th and 11th centuries. One area in which this cross-cultural fertilization took place was in India. Initial contact of Muslims with India began as early as 711 AD under the Muhammad bin Qasim, who arrived and colonized Sindh. For most of 3 centuries, Sindh remained the only area in India where Muslim rule persisted. However, this changed with the coming of the Muhammad Ghaznavi, who died in 1030. The Muslim rule expanded with successive dynasties until from 1526 onwards, and we witnessed the beginning of the most known of the Muslim rulers, the Mughals, whose reign over northern India flourished until the 18th century. The Ismaili movement, which all gave rise to the Ginans, the subject matter of our talk today, began also to establish their mission Dawa in India much at the same time and mainly in Sindh and Multan. Ismailis also built the city called Mansuria, honoring their Imam of the time, the third Fatmid Imam Khalif al-Mansur, who ruled from Tunisia. It was the fourth Fatmid Imam Khalif al-Muiz who established the Al-Azhar University in 972 AD in Cairo, which has over the course of centuries become a bastion of Sunni scholarship. As a brief introduction, I would like to say the following about the Ismaili community to which I belong. The Ismailis, the CMM Ismaili Muslims generally known as the Ismailis, belong to the Shia branch of Islam. Islam is divided in two major denominations, namely Sunnis and Shias. The Shia branch of Islam accepted Ali bin Abu Talib, cousin and a prophet as their Imam, spiritual and temporal leader, who was married to Fatima, the prophet's daughter. Ismailis have a long and complex history dating back to the formative period of Islam. They have made major contributions in the field of education, science, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and other fields. Upon the death of the fifth Imam, Hazrat Al-Jafar Sadiq, the Shia split into several groups. Ismailis accepted and followed Hazrat Ismail, elder son of Jafar Sadiq, as their Imam and spiritual leader. Those who followed the Musa al-Kazim, the younger son of Jafar Sadiq, called Isnasiris or dwellers. From the time of the Imam of Hazrat Ali, the Imams of the Ismaili Muslims have ruled over the territories and peoples in various areas of the world at a different periods of history and in accordance with the needs of the time, have given rules of conduct and constitutions in conformity with Islamic concepts of unity, brotherhood, justice, tolerance, and goodwill. One of the major ways the Shia describe themselves is through the institution of Imamat. In accordance with the Shia doctrine, tradition, and interpretation of history, the Holy Prophet ﷺ designated and appointed his cousin and son-in-law Hazrat Maulana Ali to be the first Imam to continue the interpretations of Allah's final message and to guide his followers and proclaim that the Imamat should continue by heredity through Hazrat Maulana Ali and his daughter Hazrat Fatima. By virtue of this office and in accordance with the faith and belief of the Ismaili Muslims, the Imam thus enjoys full authority of governance over and in respect of all religious and community matters of the Ismaili Muslims. Sorry. Yeah. The current Imam in the succession of the Prophet and Hazrat Ali is His Highness the Aga Khan Port, who was honored in Delhi on 8 April 2015 by His Excellency Pranab Mukherjee, President of India, who awarded His Highness the Aga Khan the Padma Vibhushan Award, one of the country's highest civilian decorations for his contribution to social development in India. Ismaili Imamat and the Aga Khan Development Network, AKDN, has a long and historic relationship with India, dating back over 100 years to the first Aga Khan school in Mundra, Gujarat, which was established by the Aga Khan's grandfather, Sir Sultan Muhammad Shah in 1905. Aga Khan III, Sir Sultan Muhammad Shah, died in 1957, was nominated to represent India to the League of Nations in 1932 and served as President of the League of Nations from 1937 to 1938. Aga Khan Palace, Pune. The Aga Khan Palace was built in 1892 by Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah Aga Khan III in Pune, India, at a cost of rupees 12 lakh. The palace was an act of charity by the spiritual leader of the Nizari Ismaili Muslims who wanted to help the poor in the neighboring areas of Pune who were drastically hit by the famine. In 1942, the palace was converted as a prison for Gandhiji, Bapu's house arrest, along with his wife Kasturba, Mahadev Desai, Sarojini Naidu, Miraben, and his top advisors. In 1972, the palace was donated to the Government of India by the Aga Khan Fort as a monument and a mark of respect to Gandhiji and his philosophy. This is now a museum and a tourist attraction. New Delhi. In recent years, restoration of a Humayun tomb, Sundar Nursery, and Nizamuddin Basti by the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, AKTC, on the World Heritage Site has been completed. Hyderabad, the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, AKTC, which has worked on the restoration of Qutub Shahi tomb, has now taken up renovation of Paigam tombs, also known as Taj Mahal of the Deccan. Aga Khan Foundation has received an award for implementing a development model that aims at improving access to water and sanitation for marginal communities across urban and rural areas of the country. Prime Minister Narendra Modi praised Aga Khan on his Diamond Jubilee for the work done by his foundation towards sanitation, heritage, conservation, and rural development. The Aga Khan Foundation pledged to build further 100,000 toilets in India. There are several contexts that need to be considered when exploring Ginans. The first one, the larger context of the Organization of Islam is a religion and a polity. By the time the Ginanic Dawa began, there were already many Sufi schools that were established in the area and also local religious movements such as Bhakti movement that promoted esoteric understanding of religious ideas and practices. The second is a continuation of development of Muslims' religious thought and ideas. This necessarily influenced the Ginanic movement. It is also become a space for competition for influence among the potential converts to a particular interpretation of Islam. The third, naturally, is the heir of the Shia Ismaili interpretation of the faith and is illustrious intellectual and esoteric heritage. Fourthly, it should be considered as a part of larger Indian devotional poetic literature. And finally, the influence of Indic environment in which this literature evolved and got consolidated. The main target group of the Dawa were the local Hindus, and in order to appeal to the group, the Ginans appropriated significantly from the imagery, symbolism and ideas from the local cultures and folk tradition, such as the groups of sons, bhakts, and yogis. These were clearly formulated to express Ismaili perspective and religious teachings. The teaching of the faith was done mainly through Ginans. The individuals who were authorized to carry out the Dawa work came to be known as the Pir. The Farsi word reserved usually for the wise person or a saint. The Pirs not only transmitted the teaching of the faith, but established the communities and institutions such as Jamaat Khana, places of congregation for the followers, and appointed local dealers to manage the affairs of the community. First Jamaat Khana was established by Pir Sadruddin at Kotla, Sindh, and subsequently at Kotra in Punjab. Although, as mentioned, the Ismaili Dawa in the South Asian continent flourished during the late 8th to 10th century, the evolution of the Ginans came much later in the 13th and 14th centuries. It may be useful to consider the Ginans having a potential to promote pluralism. There are several elements in the making as well as utilization of the Ginans that give Ginans this potential. The Ginans, though a single literary genre, employs many languages. Sometimes several languages coexist within one single Ginan. This linguistic plurality is reinforced by the thematic or doctrinal plurality, whereby the ideas, teachings from several religious traditions integrate in the Ginans. Furthermore, today there are several Ginans have such universal teaching that they are in use in more than one community, being able to speak to various traditions and cultures. Finally, the composers of the Ginan are revered across many communities. As the Dawa evolved, it acquired for a specific name. It was still known as the Satpan tradition. The term Satpan means the true path. Today, the Ismailis of the Satpanti group are spread in South Asia, Far East, Middle East, East Africa, Europe, North America, and other countries. Being a religious source, Ginans drew the inspirations particularly from religious scriptures, both the Holy Quran and Hindu scriptures. Here we have examples of how the Ginans inspire universal values and outlook, therefore the inspiring a firm belief in the essentials of the human nature and its dignity. There are several Ginans which deliver the same message as in the Holy Gita, Holy Bible, and Holy Quran on the subject of creation, ethics, moral issues, etc. The Ginans address varieties of themes and use narrations from the local folklores and cultural motifs. Since Ginans were specifically used to convey religious teachings, they used local religious vocabulary and ideas that were reformulated to fit the interpretation of Islam given in the Ismaili tradition. Ginans have sustained the Indo-Pakistani community for centuries and continues to be used as a devotional literature among them. Over the years, much work has been done by both Ismaili and non-Ismaili scholars and individuals on the subject. To name a few are Dr. Urvashi Pandya, late Dominic Sheila Khan, Dr. Azim Nanji, Dr. Ali Shani, Dr. Balwant Jani, Dr. Ghulam Ali Alana, and many more. I have had the opportunity to attend and participate in various conferences and seminars in United Kingdom and overseas. Earliest one was in Rajkot in 2004. Last of my presentation was in Mumbai at Koja conference 2 years ago. Ismaili Institute's collection of manuscripts in Gujarati and Khojki script comprises of a few hundred volumes, and there are many more in private collection. Khojki, a special script adopted and used almost exclusively by the Ismaili community of the Indian subcontinent. It was employed primarily to record the religious literature. The earliest manuscripts in this work written in Hindi, Arabic, Saraiki, and Persian languages. All the transcribed in the Khojki script, some of them are more recent manuscripts are in Gujarati. Ginans are the most significant generic representative in this collection, containing both prose and poetry. Those compositions are of immense importance in understanding the development of Indian Ismaili thought, literature, and history. Besides the Ginans, the manuscript the other works including selections from the Holy Quran and traditions of the Prophet, numerous prayers as well as devotional poetry in praise of the Imam. Many writings of prominent mystic poets of both the vernacular Indian and Persian traditions are also preserved in these manuscripts. The Ginans are also taught as a part of the religious education curriculum and used regularly as part of the daily Jamaat Khana rituals during various festivals and a part of recitations during the funeral ceremonies. The community traditions attribute the origin of Khojki script to Pir Sadruddin. It is also known to have existed among the Hindu Lohana community who preserve their religious traditions in this script. Interestingly, the Pir Sadruddin is attributed to have converted a large number of Lohanas to Ismaili Tariqa and hence perhaps inheriting the script and using it creatively to record Ismaili religious teaching. Khojki script was developed by Pir Sadruddin from Lohanki to preserve the Ismaili literature. Khojki script is no longer a learning script, and I learned that in the primary school about 70 years ago. And I had to relearn script to enable me to index and read the Ginans. Ginans has been my hobby, and I have been collecting Ginans in both books and audio cassettes for many years. And my father had a very good collection of Ginanic literature, some dating back to 1895 onwards. My mother had a beautiful voice and was very fond of singing Ginans all the time. I enjoy listening to the Ginans, but unfortunately I don't have a good voice, so I can sing only a few Ginans. Today, I have put one of the finest collection of Ginanic literature consisting of English, Gujarati, Khojki texts dating back to 1895 and audio CDs and cassettes, which have been converted in CDs and preserved in Gnan Library. Few years ago, when I was thinking to retire from my business, I thought of organizing my collection, index, label, and put them in order. I started off with few Gnan books and cassettes I had, but as usual, they were lying all over the house and I could never find when I wanted it. First of all, I had to listen to all the Gnans in each cassette and write down the titles. But quite a lot of Gnans, although I had heard them before, the correct title could not be identified. So I had to refer to the few books I had, and this was a nightmare to find the correct title. In some instances, I had to listen the whole Gnan more than once and could not find the title in any of the books in my collection. For instance, the Gnan Firat Neja Tambal Vadse, I wrote as a Tirat and Tambal Vadse, as a Tirat is a more common word used in the Gnans. In absence of any such title available in any of the book, I had to write the last paragraph as Pir Sadruddin Bolia, and I had to look into each Gnan by Pir Sadruddin and go upwards to find the right title. I started indexing each book into my word processor, not realizing that indexing on a spreadsheet would be easier, as this can sort out the titles in alphabetical order. I had completed indexing about 20 books when talking to a computer expert, Azim Jamal, who advised me to transfer the information on a spreadsheet and very kindly transfer the data on the spreadsheet. Later on, a lecturer at Edinburgh University developed the database on Microsoft Access, which allowed me to work through various tables. After a while, he abandoned the project, but I continued to feed the information in various tables. The next database format was designed by a Chinese database, Mr. Ming Mo. My weakest point is computing. Although I have basic skills to operate the system, but when it comes to technology and creating new data, I have to rely on other expertise, which at times is very frustrating and time consuming. And more than once, I have been let down. Last database was developed on Access, but the interface was on C++. Current database is developed by Vijay Virani in the year 2011, which is the most comprehensive database ever produced.
Pyarili Bhai,
Yeah, I'll give
can you
me
wrap up, please? Can you wrap up?
I'm just finishing.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm proud to say that the request of the Institute of Ismaili Studies and with the assistance of my grandson, Faisal, we have developed a Khochki phones, which is the first time ever to have been developed, which is compatible for POPC. I trust this will create more awareness and assist in the study of Khochki script, which is almost forgotten. The, the Khochki Jiva font is now available to any scholars. So please email me your request and this will be sent to you with instructions without any cost. Last but the least, we are in process of establishing a Center for the Study of Gnans and Devotional Literature at the University of Mumbai in India. Finally, if you allow me, I will play a short Gnan of 2 minutes of Nansapuri Nagri Maya Mandu Rachai. And enjoy, Rachai, enjoy and thank you very much for listening to me. Namaskar and Yali Madad. Shall I play this Gnan?
Pyarili Bhai, if it's okay, I really appreciate because I think so we are running out of the time.
It's only 2 minutes of Gnan. If you
Okay.
allow me, otherwise we can stop it.
Okay. Okay, go ahead. We have to cut down. Thank you, Pyarali Bhai, for inspiring us with lots of knowledge, and it was a very informative session. We really all enjoyed it. We'll summarize at the end of the session. Can I call upon our next speaker, Professor Michel Bovin from France? He's going to present his research paper on the Sufi paradigm and the makings of the vernacular knowledge in a colonial in India. The case of Sindhi from 1851 to 1929. Michel Bovin is a director of the study of the Center of the Indian and South Asian Studies at the Advanced School of Social Sciences at the Paris Research University. He teaches historical anthropology of colonial and post-colonial societies of South Asia. He's the author and a writer of 15 books. His most recent book has been published this year, titled The Sufi Paradigm and the Making of Vernacular Knowledge in Colonial Sindhi. The floor is yours, Professor Michel.
Okay, thank you very much. And first, I'd like you to know that I'm very pleased and delighted to meet you all. So thank you very much to Professor Iqbal, Professor Urvashi, Parin, and everyone. It's very nice to see you and to share with you some knowledge about this Indic sacred literature. Yeah, so I'd like to talk about Shah Abdul Latif, a Sufi poet from Sindh, and about his poetry named Shah Jori Salo. And of course, I'd like to explain about the articulation between his belonging to Islam, because he was a Muslim, and his ability to incorporate non-Islamic and particularly Hindu reference in his poetry. So finally also, but of course, I will not have time to deal with it, but it is related to what is singular in his poetry and also in the Sindhi vernacular, and what is shared with other neighboring regions such as Gujarat, Punjab, Rajasthan, etc. So first, I'd like to provide a kind of historical context, because when Shah Abdul Latif was born in 1689, and especially in the early 18th century, it was a very troubled political context, because it was the fall of the Mughal Empire. Aurangzeb passed away in 1707, and after there were a number of invasions. For example, in 1739, Nadir Shah's invasion, and then after, from 1748 onwards, Ahmad Shah Durrani from Afghanistan invaded 7 times the Indian subcontinent. And so it was during this very troubled time that Shah Abdul Latif was living in Sindh. And Sindh was to some extent at the forefront of this invasion from Iran and also Afghanistan. So we have to keep in mind that during when he was living, it was a kind of time of fear in Sindh and in the other regions of the Indian subcontinent. Also, it is important to know that Shah Abdul Latif was a Sayyid, so he belonged to the highest social class in the Muslim society. And it is said that he was always keeping with him 3 books. First, the Quran. Second, the Masnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi in Persian. And third, his own great-grandfather's work. His name was Shah Abdul Karim, and so it is called Diwan of Shah Abdul Karim. And this third was in Sindhi. So it's very interesting to see these 3 references, one in Arabic, the Quran, and there are many direct quotations in his poetry in Arabic. The second, it is Persian with Jalaluddin Rumi, and also you can find he borrowed expressions in Persian from Rumi. And third, his own great-grandfather, Shah Abdul Karim, in Sindhi. Yeah, so of course, the Shad-Jori Salo is a very important and huge work, and I have to focus only on 2 points, which are maybe for me the most important. First, it is what I call the Sufi vernacular framework of his work. And the second, it is related to what I call the Jogi paradigm. Of course, Jogi is a vernacular word for yogi. Yes, so there are other topics which are very important, but due to the short time, I have to focus on these 2 topics especially. Yeah, so when I start with the Sufi vernacular structure of his work, for me, there is a kind of ideological framework, and it is a vernacularized form of the Wahdat-e-Wujud. The Wahdat-e-Wujud is shared by many Sufi. It is a mystical ideology I will say a few words about. It is shared by many Sufi, but not by all the Sufi. For example, the Naqshbandi Tariqa, they don't agree with this ideological framework named the Wahdat-e-Wujud. So usually it is translated, it is from Arabic. It is translated by oneness of being or unity of existence. And the general meaning is that beyond the formal and institutional practice of religion, there is the mystical quest of God, to reach God finally. And I shall quote Shah Abdul Latif, but I use Christopher Shackle's translation, just published in 2018 by Harvard University Press. It is, according to my knowledge, the last English translation of the Shad-Jori Salo. So I quote Shah Abdul Latif in English: "Namaz and fasting are indeed good deeds, but there is some other wisdom by which to behold the beloved." So it is a very good explanation of what is the Wahdat-e-Wujud. In his work, we can find many quotations related to this Wahdat-e-Wujud, both in Arabic or Persian, but also in Sindhi. For example, you can find Tunjo Alahekro, your God is one. And in this Sindhi register, Shah Abdul Latif also quote many times his great-grandfather named Shah Abdul Karim. But maybe that the best explanation of the Vardhati Mujur we can find is the following. I quote in English: from unity came multiplicity. The total of multiplicity is unity. Reality is indeed one. In Sindhi, it is Hak Hakiki Ekro. Do not be misled by speaking in another way. So for me, this, what I call the vernacular Vardhati Wujud, is the core of his poetry. And it is from this ideological framework that he is able to incorporate non-Islamic references, and especially borrowed from the different Hindu school, which were important during his lifetime, and especially one, the Nat Panthi. So I turn now to my second topic I'd like to deal with about the Shajoli Salo. It is the Jogi. Christopher Shackle put Yogi, but in vernacular Sindhi and other, it is Jogi. So it is very impressive how Shah Abdul Latif speaks of the Jogi. First, there are many references to them. He used many different words to name them, but obviously for him, they are the true models of mystical quest. For him, and it is put explicitly in his poetry, if you want to reach God, you have to follow physically and from the method, the methodology, the Jogi. And it is accepted that Shah Abdul Latif himself spent about 3 years with the Jogi, and he followed them to different Hindu pilgrimages, including Dwarka, I shall quote something about from his poetry, and also Hinglaj. And I think that it would be very interesting to draw a kind of comparison between how Shah Abdul Latif referred to the Jogi with the Jogi they are depicted in Kabir's poetry. So there is a whole chapter of his poetry, Shajari Salo, which is dealing with the Jogi. And the title of the chapter is Sur, chapter Ramakali. I quote in English: "Oh, do not forget the Jogi for a moment. Search desperately for the footprints of the ascetics. Look for the path they have followed and go after them. Pursue them night and day. I will not survive without them." So in this chapter named Sur Ramakali, all the quatrains end with this verse: "I will not survive without them." So it is very meaningful about the importance of the Jogi for Shah Abdul Latif, and especially in relation with his spiritual and mystical quest. So I could quote many very interesting statements he put about the Jogi. For example, for him, the Jogi are those who have attained ecstasy. For him, the Jogi live in accordance with the divine will. Also, he put the Jogi in relation with what is a final goal in Sufism. It is the annihilation of the ego, of the self. And Shah Abdul Latif, he used different words for the self, the ego, but especially Rudi. So in one verse, he put, I quote, "the masters," and in Sindhi he put the Sami, Sami, use their horns to consume the self, Rudi. So he looked to be even very dependent on the yogi. He is very convinced that they are the best guide on the mystical past. And as I say, especially in relation with the annihilation of ego. And there is many reference to this point, that the yogi are the best for the annihilation of the ego. And in Sufism at large, it is a prerequisite for the reaching of God. So I just want to quote another quatrain, because it is very representative of the construction Shah Abdul Latif is able to make in relation always with the Muslim, I would say, referent and the Hindu referent. This quatrain is very amazing. I quote in English: "The naked ones," it is Nanga, Sindhi, "have gone to Hinglaj to hold the goddess. The devotees of Shiv rejoice at the sight of Dwarka. Their guide is Ali, the first Imam. I will not survive without them." So this is very typical of the interwoven between this Muslim and Hindu references. And the last meaning is that the mystical quest for reaching God is beyond finally the formal religious belonging. And so it is why he come to say that the guide of the yogi is Ali, which is of course for the Sufi and also for the Shia, the first Imam. So now I'd like to say also a few words about how in the 19th century, the Shajuri Salo, this poetry became a paradigm for all the devotional literature and more in Sindhi, for the Muslim authors, Shia, Sunni, Sufi, and also for the Hindu, for the Nanakpanthi, etc. And interestingly, of course, there are many different versions of the Shajuri Salo, but the first to be printed was the one by Ernst Röhm at the request of the Sindh commissioner, Sir Bartle Frere. So the first printing was made in Germany with Sindhi script in 1866. It was the first time the Shajuri Salo was printed, only in Sindhi. But in the second half of the 19th century, the first to take, I would say, scholarly interest in the Shajuri Salo were Hindu gentlemen, Hindu Sindhi gentlemen. And for example, in 1890, Hindu scholar from Sindh, Lilaram Vatanmal Lalvani, published maybe the first academic work on Shah Abdul Latif. And it is a very remarkable work, especially in the first part of the second volume. He explains, I quote him, in full the Arabic verses of the Quran and saying of the Prophet that occur in the Shajuri Salo. So he had listed all the Quranic quotations in the Shajuri Salo, and he explained them in his book. And also, of course, Shah Abdul Latif and the Sufi paradigm as expressed in his poetry, Shajuri Salo, was very influential for the other poets from Sindh, both Muslim and Hindu. And I shall quote the case of another very important poet named Sachal Sarmast, who passed away in the early 19th century. But himself, he was very interested in this issue of the Vada Vujud. And I would say that he went further than Shah Abdul Latif. First, he really coined a totally vernacular concept. He called himself Haq Mawjud. So from the initial Wahdat-e Wujud, Haq Mawjud, and he incorporated a lot of Hindu references beyond the figure of the Jogi, as we can find it in Shah Abdul Latif's poetry. As a matter of fact, Sachal Sarmast is naming a number of Hindu gods in his poetry as references, but of course always in relation with the mystical quest, always. Another poet from Sindh, which was influenced by Shah Abdul Latif and his Sufi paradigm, was a Hindu gentleman. He's known under the nickname of Sami. And also he was the author of a mystical and devotional poetry, Sami Jaslok. And in his poetry, we can find, so to say, the inspiration from Shah Abdul Latif, because even if his work is considered to be mostly to be located inside the Bhakti and also the Vedanta tradition, he used a lot of Sufi concept borrowed from Shah Abdul Latif. As for instance, the concept of mast, to be drunk with divine knowledge, or the most important Sufi concept of ishq, the divine love, the mystical love. So I have no time, unfortunately, also to draw parallels with Guinan literature that was addressed by Uncle Payali, but many work should be done about this parallel between the Guinan literature and the Sindhi Sufi poetry. And finally, what I want to say is that even in today India, after the partition, after the migration of about 1 million Hindu Sindhi to India, the tradition of Shah Abdul Latif is very alive among the Indian Sindhi. And since then, there are many publications, translation into English of the Shah Jodi Salo, performed by Sindhi Indian scholars. And so it is very meaningful of the importance that Shah Abdul Latif and his Sufi poetry still have for the Sindhi in Pakistan, in India, and also in the diaspora all over the world. Okay, so I think it's time to conclude. And what I want to say is that I gave only a short, a very small insight about this articulation in the Shah Jodi Salo between the Muslim belonging of Shah Abdul Latif. He was a Sayyid, and it is to say he was a practicing Muslim, praying 5 times a day, doing the fast, etc. And on the other side, the Hindu referent, especially through the figure of the Jogi, since the Jogi were for him the model of asceticism, and their method was the best to reach God in the Sufi quest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Michel, for your thought-provoking presentation. Our next and the last speaker for our session is Rashida Damani from Canada, who is presenting a paper on a Guru Mahima in the Guinan. Rashida Damani is a freelancer researcher of Khoja tradition, Guinan and its history. She is a student of Indian classical music and an active member of Canadian narrative Shabd Setu Gujarati Literature Group. Formerly part of the scholar team in the South Asian Studies Department at the University of Toronto. She is a project management professional with AMCOM, telecommunication management, and a master degrees. So Rashida Bhai, floor is yours now.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good evening to all. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Pandya for giving me this opportunity and Professor Akhtar for giving me this opportunity. And I would like to begin by telling you a story, of course, from the Guinan. It is narrated in a Guinan called Moman Chetamni, by Sayyid Imam Shah. It is said that Pir Shams once stayed in a outskirts of a village. In that village, many Sufi gurus were residing. On knowing about the arrival of Pir Shams in that village, the chief of all Sufi, named Bahauddin Zakaria, sent a glass of milk full up to the brim to Pir Shams. The glass of milk was so completely full that even one more drop could have spilled the milk. However, Pir Shams plucked a flower from a nearby bush, put some of the petals of this flower on top of the surface of the milk. The flower petals, being lighter than the milk, floated on top of the milk without spilling a bit of it. The Pir sent back the glass of milk to the Sufi guru. The disciple of Pir Shams was astonished by this act and was unable to understand the logic behind such action. Pir Shams explained to him that by sending a glass full of milk, the Sufi guru wanted to tell that there are already so many gurus and learned people in the village that there is no need or no room for one more. But I sent the message to convey that I do not need any space, but will float as the flower petal floated on the milk. It is interesting to note that such stories are common in the similar context of mystical teachers such as Guru Nanak. Whatever be the historical validity of such anecdote, it conveys an important message of how mystics of any religious background, when they understand their respective religion from an inner or esoteric mystical dimension, they often sought to live in harmony, which was a cornerstone of their teaching. Gnan literature is a part of such mystical dimension, mystical literature, which recognizes the unity behind the diversity of humankind and religions. As you know, my topic is Guru Mahima in Gnan. Murid Murshid relationship. Murid or Shishya, Chela, a disciple, is the seeker who desires to undertake a spiritual journey. Murshid or the Guru plays a pivotal role in lighting the spiritual path of the Murid, the seeker. Murid submits to the Murshid through a formal bond of submission or an oath of allegiance, variously known as Kol, Vachan, promise in Gnans. Various murids of a particular murshid form a community, a spiritual fraternity, or the order. The murshid guides his murids collectively as a community and also as an individual disciple in their material and spiritual development. As part of the commitment of the murshid to guide his murid in his spiritual quest, the murshid grants him a mystical word, Sat Shabd, for meditation and contemplation, which not only serves as a guru mantra for meditation, but the word itself becomes his inner guide. The uninitiated, i.e., the ordinary or ignorant, cannot appreciate or understand the depth of such a privileged, deep spiritual bond between Murid and the Murshid. However, by following the guidance of the Murshid and through the grace, Guru Krupa, the Murid attains to spiritual alchemy a spiritual transformation, ultimately attaining spiritual union, a blissful state of self-realization or darshan, thus fulfilling the ultimate purpose of one's spiritual quest, the life itself. I will now share some of the references of various Gnans related to this subject in following 4 categories. First, why do we need a master? Second, in search of a master. Third, submission and devotion to the master. Fourth, alchemy, Guru Darshan. Now, Guru or Murshid, the word itself has been addressed in Gnans as Sajan, Balam, Sahib, Sahiya, Peer, Gur, Swami, Pia, Sakhi, Shah, etc. So I will quote some Gnans one by one because there is not time to explain the meaning. I'll try to give you gist in certain cases. Gnan by Pir Shams refers to Guru Diva, Guru Chandruda, Hare Sacha Guru Deepak Darya, Guru Vina Tala Mardo न खुले तोहे भरे रहें भंडार. बुज निरंजन by P Sadruddin, पहले तो तोकु शरीयत बतावे, पीछे राह तरीकत लावे, जब तुझे हाल हकीकत आवे, मार्फत केरी सुध सब पावे. There is a Gnan by Pir Hasan Kabiruddin. It's a long Gnan and I'll quote 2 verses. Abadhu Guru male to arth batave ane mite chit ka shesa. Jal bina kamal na phule taku murakh jane hansa. Abadhu gur male to parche sadhu gur bina baat na pave. Ginan mandal ma jalbal divo dise so gur bina hath na ave. And another Gnan is Jhutha marna to sab jug mare ane sacha na mare koi gur ginane je mare tise bahut marna na hoye. There is one more Gnan for the Guru Mahima. Akshar ek jo prem ka murshid diya bataye re 14 lok mahe deepak bhaya so sab mahe dodiya jaye re. This is the precious status what Guru can do. Another Gnan for what Guru's character or what Guru's grace is. Sahastra baras jo kije bhakti murshid keri ekaj rati. Murshid kamil ku nahi jane so jugma fire andha. Without a true guide, one could be blindfold in this world. Now my second topic, subtopic is in search of Guru. And when we talk about Murshid or Guru guide, there is esoteric and exoteric. There is a physical presence of Guru and the Guru's teaching and Guru's Sat Shabd in inner journey is also our Guru. Again, that is referred by one of the peers, Sat Shabd hai Guru Hamara. Another Gnan is Jot Prakash lije ghat andar, Gur bina ghor andhera, kahe pir gulmali shah samran karale, samaj samaj man mera. Dil mahe devad pujiye ane dil mahe dev duar, dil mahe saiya ape vase ane dil mahe ape didar. So these Gnans are talking about the inner connection with the true knowledge. Gnan dhyan mahe sarve sudh pai, khoj khoj kar milana. Within the Gnans is to be found knowledge of everything. Search, research, and you will find it. So just a glimpse of what one would search for Guru as a Murshid and a guru within one's heart. I'm referring to one more reference for this search from the Ginan Mal Khajina Bahotej Bhariya. You may have filled many treasures with riches, composed by Pir Ghulam Ali Shah. And I will only quote the last two verses that deals with the light of the master and inner search. If you would abandon delusion and reflect on the divine, then search inside your heart. Khoj ghat andar tera. Take his light and radiance into your heart, for all is pitch darkness without the guide. Pir Ghulam Ali Shah says, practice remembrance, understand this, O my heart, understand this. And now we come to submission part. So there are some conditions in this bond, in this relationship, that how Murshid will accept the murid and what is murid's sacrifice, understanding, devotion for his master. एजी गतमाहे आवीने वीरा भाई कर जोड़ी रहिए गुरना वचन आपना सिर पर धरिए. It's talking about obedience to your master. पहले पाड़ो ते सतगुरनी वाचा बीजे चालो हक ने साचा त्रीजे तंतव पामशो. अपना बाना दूर चुकावो गुर का ज्ञान कमावो. नर पिर सादे पिर शम्स बोलिया साचा सामी ने आराधो. આપણા સામીને સાચું કરી શ્રેવીએ તો દુઃખ દારિદ્ર સર્વે થાય દૂર. પાપ જાય ને પવિત્ર થાય જો નિર્મલ કરી પીએ નૂર. That is another condition that one has to constantly work on purifying one's heart to receive the grace of the master. And we move to the devotion aspect. Tu hi gur, tu hi noor, tu hi ए भी आशा, तुझ बिना हमको नींद ना आवे, न भावे अन्न न पानी ओ सामी जी. It is like yearning and longing for meeting the beloved or master. लगड़ी रे प्रीत हम नेह न छोड़ू, धर सिर करवत अंग न मोड़ू, जो जीव जावे शाह का नाम न छोड़ू. And as Pyarali uncle mentioned about the last Ginan of Sayyida Begum Ai Rahim Rahman, there is a verse, Tan man dhan guru ko arpan kije, to ginane ginane ginan. And there is another metaphor in Mira Sayyid Khan's Ginan, Hure Piyasi. Pir explains by this metaphor what is the true love. By giving, there could be false love too. झूठी रे प्रीत भमर की कहिए, पियूं जी का दर्शन इयूं न वलिए. झूठी रे प्रीत भमर की कहिए, जो कलियां कलियां रस लेत है, तेम क्रिया ना हीणा गाफल बंदा, सो पिया पर जीव न देत है. गाफल अंधा, सो पिया पर जीव न देत है. Whereas he's talking about true love, साची रे प्रीत पतंग की कहिए, पियूं जी का दर्शन इयूं कर लइए. साची रे प्रीत पतंग की कहिए, जो उलट उलट अंग देत है, एक दीपक के रे कारणे कई पतंग जीव देत है. And Pir Shams beautifully expresses longing for beloved and his devotion and love in one of his compositions. Let's explore one of the compositions of Pir Shams, Ab Teri Mohabbat Lagi, which expresses deep love and devotion for his master. And I will share few verses. Now that I'm in love with you, my Lord, my heart is struck with love for you. Let I look into eye, नैनों से नैन मिलाओ, अब तेरी मोहब्बत लागी, दिल मेरे मोहब्बत लागी. Next verse. For your secret, I am mad, my Lord. Let it be. Let reason be overcome by love. Now that I'm in love with you, my Lord. तेरी रमज का पिया मैं हूं दीवाना, इश्क अक्ल भुलाया मेरे साहिब. And the last verse. When the face was seen, there was joy at heart. Pir Shams told the tale. Now I'm in love with you, my Lord. Mukhada dekhya, tab man harakhya. Pir Shams kanthi sunaya mere sahib. And that brings us to the darshan part, alchemy part. Satguru Paras, Munivarat Ramba. What happens when there is a union between Murid and Murshid? Satguru Paras, Munivarat Ramba, Bhete to sovan hoye. Another Ginan, Paras Parase, Loha Rang Palate, to Jagamag Jyot Ujari Re Wala. They're talking about Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone was the central symbol of the mystical terminology of alchemy, symbolizing perfection at its finest, enlightenment and heavenly bliss. And what happens after one experiences that? O Sami ji, meetha so meetha, ne kadwa bhi meetha, to aa guru ke vachane phal mithada ji. The next Ginan depicts the same expression. Satguru miliya mune aaj anand hu pami. The joy after meeting my master. Darshan dekhiya tyare, man santokhiya ji, Mahapad pami churaj. Mahapad is the highest status one can get in closeness with the master. And Pir Sadruddin says in Sakhi Mahapad, it's very beautiful. Ginan talks about spirituality and adhyatma. Sakhi Mahapad keri vaat koi ka jane re, jene Satgur miliya sar sohi pichane re. Sakhi कहवा सरीखो नथी मारो सामी, ते तो जोया सरीखो छे अलख अनामी. सखी अलख अनामी साहेब लाग्या मीठा रे, भणे पीर सदरदीन शाह में नजरे सु दीठा re. And there are more Ginans. So we just try to get the glimpse out of how various verses are giving us expressions and articulations. There is another style of writing Ginans, which is called as Garbi, and I will quote few verses again related to Guru Mahima. Now, Garbi, which were set to dance tempos in order to accompany Gujarati folk dancers with clapping or rhythmic beating of sticks. These type of dances are still performed to this day among the Ismaili Jamaats originating from India, Pakistan, and East Africa. Pir Shams has composed many Ginans, including some Garbis. So I will share some verses from these Garbis attributed to Pir Shams, glorifying the significance of master and his knowledge. Guru Gnan.
Rashidabai,
Yes.
Rashidabai, can you please conclude? The time
Okay.
is, please, thank you.
Just last two verses. Tare vaga te gnan na vaja re ma, khel kida gur sham se re ma. Gur ઓળખો તો આનંદ પામશો રે લોલ, તેથી અમર અમરાપુરી પામશો રે લોલ. હવે કોલ અમારા પૂરા થયા રે લોલ, પીર શમસે કોલ દઈ પાડ્યા રે લોલ. It is talking about kohl, which is allegiance that we mentioned. And I will conclude now in this presentation. I hope this has given you some insight, again very short, into the relationship between Murid and Murshid, as well as the importance of the spiritual quest through the lens of Ginans. This is a vast subject, and I have shared some aspects with you. Ginans are precious treasure. One can study various aspects such as its language, poetic beauty, its adaptation of Indian classical ragas, etc. It would enrich our appreciation of not only the content of Ginans, but also an appreciation of the rich socio-religious context of Indian subcontinent in which such a rich literature could flourish. Once again, I thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rashida Bai, for a wonderful presentation. I will be summarizing for all the speakers now. I don't know what to say. I must say that you have all done a fantastic job. It has been such a pleasure to listen to so many talented scholars here. Within this session, we had some great presentation. They have really discussed key issues associated with Indic sacred literature through various different perspectives. So if you talk about our first speaker, Professor Bharat Mehta gave us a good analytic study about the Tagore in Gujarati. He spoke about Tagore's wonderful contribution to the literature during time, and there was a conflict between the religion, values, and culture. He inspired the world through his moral teaching to understand religious value and combine it with the cultural values and the life together in harmony. It is not surprising that through his action, Tagore has received a Nobel Prize. Our second speaker, Pyarali Bhai Jiva, gave us a good insight into the spirituality of Gyanan. He gave a wonderful history of Gyanan teachings through time and incorporated history of through the years, linking the Ismaili history and the concept. Our third speaker, Vishal Bovin, has said with such a great perspective on the work of Shah Abd al-Latif, who composed Sajo Resilo. He demonstrated his knowledge on the Sufi paradigm and the issue of the Sindh vernacular. The particular focus on the articulation between the great Sufi and the poet belonging to Islam and his ability, and to incorporate non-Islamic references. In his poetry and the comparison to the regional literature of the time, like Gyanans composed by Ismaili Peers and other Bhakti poets, was very interesting. Our last presenter, Rashida Damani, wonderfully depicted Guru Mahima in the Gyanan. She took us on a journey to explore Gyanan literature through a historical context and highlighted the richness of the context and of the content what she has covered by saying so many beautiful Gyanan, using wonderful symbolism through Gyanans like Jo ho jire mara hansa, meaning, oh brother, my swan like soul. She also shared an aesthetic and innovative dimension through illustrating ragas and musical richness. I will give the floor to our organizer, Professor Iqbal Akhtar.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the panelists coming on today. This was really a wonderful opportunity to begin this conversation. I'm glad we were able to have Professor Bovin, we were able to have Pyarali Jiva, Ms. Damani, Pareen. So it's really kind of an international conference, kind of trying to approach these issues, think of them in a multilingual, through multilingual dimensions, and also to have a global conversation. So hopefully this is the beginning of a lot of initiatives. Our conference concludes tomorrow, and tomorrow we're going to be, we're very lucky to have 3 major scholars, Professor Amit Ranjan, who's going to be joining us from India. His his lecture will be entitled Prince Darashiko's Syncretic Discourses with Baba Lal Bairagi and the Position of Khojas and Similar Sects in Mid-17th Century India. Professor Urvashi Pandya at University of Mumbai, she will be talking about the poetic expression of inner journey by Imam Begum and Ganga Sati. a comparative study. And then the last speaker we'll be having tomorrow is Professor Vidya Venkatesan. She'll be talking about weddings in the Ramayana tradition, a sociocultural archive. So we're very honored that you all were able to join us today. The recording of this session will be on our YouTube site. So if you just go to YouTube and you search Western Indian Ocean Studies, you'll be able to get a copy of it. As soon as the recording populates, I will upload it, and hopefully within the next 3 hours, you'll be able to watch it. So I really appreciate you all attending, for your patience, for the thoughtful presentations that we have, and hope to see you all tomorrow. So I'm wishing you guys a wonderful day or a wonderful evening wherever you're at, and we will see you tomorrow at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And then that would be 6 p.m. in India and 1:30 p.m. in London. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Dr. Iqbal,
Thank you.
Give us the address.
Thank you, Professor Akhtar.
Okay, no problem.
Can you give us the